They called it darkness, but it was brilliance hidden under the dust of time. They said Africa had no kings, but they forgot the empires that wrote history in gold. They told the children of Africa that their story began with chains. But long before those chains, there were crowns. Crowns of wisdom, courage, and divine order. This is the truth. Time tried to erase the story of black royal blood. A story that does not beg for validation but stands as the unshakable evidence of who we were, who we are, and who we are destined to be. When you speak of royalty, you must speak of Africa. For before there were castles in Europe or kingdoms in Asia, there were palaces built along the Nile in Kush, in If and Benin, in Mali and in Songhai. Before there were thrones gilded with diamonds, there were monarchs adorned with wisdom, whose rule was not by tyranny but by divine responsibility. The first crowns were not forged by goldsmiths, they were born from purpose. They were carried by men and women who understood that leadership was sacred, that power meant service, and that their blood carried the destiny of their people. The blood of Africa runs deep, flowing like the Nile through centuries of glory, invention, and greatness. It was this same blood that built the pyramids, aligned with the stars in mathematical precision. It was this blood that carved the bronzes of Benin so detailed that even today sculptors stand in awe. It was this blood that governed the kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, empires so vast and organized that scholars traveled from across the world to learn from them. Long before colonizers drew false maps and told false stories, Africa was the heartbeat of civilization. But then came silence. Then came invasion, deception, and the rewriting of truth. The crowns were stolen, the names were changed, and the descendants of royalty were told they were slaves. The storytellers of the world buried Africa under centuries of lies. They told the children of kings that they came from savagery. They told the heirs of empires that their ancestors knew nothing. They taught the world to forget that the libraries of Timbuktu held more knowledge than all of Europe combined. They erased our faces from the paintings of greatness, and they replaced our truth with their myth. Yet truth cannot die. It may be buried, but it never decays. The bones of kings whisper from the soil, and their spirits cry out through generations, demanding to be remembered. And now that remembering has begun. Across continents, black men and women are rediscovering the royal blood that flows in their veins. They are unlearning the lies that were taught in classrooms built on colonial deception. They are returning to the knowledge that they come from dynasties, not despair, from invention, not ignorance, from greatness, not guilt. The world once trembled at the sound of African drums. Those drums were not instruments, they were communication. They were spirit, they were order. They called the people to gather, to rise, to celebrate, to mourn, to remember. Today those drums beat again, not in the villages but in the hearts of a generation waking up. Every beat says, remember who you are. Every rhythm calls out, your crown was never lost, only forgotten. The rebirth of African pride is not rebellion, it is restoration. It is the truth stepping out of the shadows where time tried to hide it. When you look at history with honest eyes, you find black royal blood everywhere. In Egypt, where queens like Hatshepsut and Nefertari ruled with grace and intelligence. In Nubia, where warriors like Amonarena stood against empires and never bowed. In West Africa, where Mansa Musa walked the earth as the richest man in recorded history, his generosity feeding nations, his wisdom guiding generations. In If, where kings ruled through divine law and artistry reached perfection. In Dahomey, where the fierce women warriors, the Agoji, defended their land with unbreakable spirit. These were not stories of fantasy. These were the foundations of world civilization. Africa did not wait for the world to teach it greatness. It taught humanity the meaning of time through astronomy, the structure of society through kingdoms, and the science of healing through nature. Even the concept of divine kingship was born in Africa, the understanding that leaders were accountable not just to people but to a higher moral order. When you understand that, you realize that black royal blood is not about superiority. It's about origin. The origin of structure, philosophy, and balance that guided humanity before greed and colonization corrupted the world's sense of truth. The tragedy of history is not that Africa fell, but that the world forgot what Africa once was. The beauty of today is that we are remembering. Every child of African descent, whether in the Caribbean, the Americas, or Europe, carries a spark from those ancient fires. When they speak of innovation, they echo Imhotep, the world's first architect and physician. When they speak of rhythm, They echo the heartbeat of the Yoruba drum. When they speak of resilience, they echo the spirit of the Igbo, who refuse to surrender their freedom. Every act of greatness from the African diaspora is not new. It is ancestral memory resurfacing in modern form. So to the descendants of kings and queens who have been told they are less than others, understand this. Your DNA carries empire. Your mind carries the dreams of inventors, philosophers, and prophets who built civilizations when the rest of the world was still finding fire. You are not the product of oppression, you are the proof of endurance. You are not lost, you are returned. Time tried to erase you, but destiny has rewritten your name in light. You were never meant to blend in. You were designed to stand out, to lead, to inspire, to remind the world of what true royalty looks like. Royalty is not just about crowns and thrones. It is about how you carry yourself when the world doubts your worth. It is how you speak when silence would be easier. It is how you rise when history tries to keep you down. Royalty is knowing that your greatness is not measured by wealth but by wisdom, not by control but by compassion, not by fear but by faith in who you are. That is the legacy of Black royal blood: dignity that cannot be taken, truth that cannot be destroyed, and power that cannot be imitated. The future of the African people will not be built by begging for recognition but by owning remembrance. The moment we stop asking to be included and start building our own, the world will see the rebirth of empires. Not in conquest but in consciousness. The new kingdoms will be built through education, unity, and pride. Our palaces will be classrooms, our crowns will be knowledge, and our armies will be generations of thinkers, creators, and builders. That is how we honor the ancestors, by becoming the living proof that their sacrifices were not in vain. History's greatest lie was not that Africa was poor, but that Africa was powerless. Today the truth is marching back into the light. You can see it in the art, the music, the innovation, and the unbreakable confidence of a people rediscovering their name. The kings are rising again, not from graves but from generations who remember. The queens are reclaiming their thrones, not in palaces but in their purpose. And the world is beginning to see that the so-called forgotten continent was never forgotten. It was only waiting for its children to come home. The story of Black royal blood is not a story of the past. It is a prophecy of the present and a promise to the future. It reminds us that no matter how far time tries to scatter truth, the roots of greatness always find their way back to the light. So walk with your head high, not in arrogance, but in remembrance. The blood that built empires runs through you. The same light that guided kings burns within you. Let your voice be your weapon, your purpose be your crown, and your unity be your empire. Because you, my friend, are not the descendant of slaves. You are the rebirth of kings. They tried to erase us, but the blood remembered. No matter how deep they buried the truth, no matter how many lies they told, something ancient continued to beat beneath the surface, the pulse of a people who refused to disappear. Empires fell, names were stolen, and languages were silenced. Yet the rhythm of Africa's greatness continued to echo through time. The conquerors could burn the libraries, they could rewrite the books. They could chain the bodies, but they could never chain the soul. The soul remembered, the blood remembered. Even in silence, memory spoke through generations, whispering, "You are not what they told you. You come from kings, you come from queens, you come from builders of worlds." The African story is not one of destruction, it is one of endurance. When they tore children from their mothers and scattered them across oceans, they believed that separation would mean erasure. But separation only spread the seed of greatness farther. The blood of Africa flowed into every continent, carrying its spirit into new lands, new tongues, and new generations. The descendants of those who were once chained now rise as visionaries, artists, scientists, and leaders. The power of the blood is not just biological, it is ancestral, spiritual, and eternal. It remembers everything that was once forgotten. When the world tried to define Africa through the lens of poverty and pain, the blood remembered abundance and wisdom. When the world mocked the skin, the blood remembered its divine hue, kissed by the sun, a reflection of creation itself. When they called us slaves, the blood remembered freedom. When they called us primitive, the blood remembered innovation. The pyramids did not rise by accident, and the gold of Mali did not shine by chance. The rhythm of civilization began in the heart of Africa, and no manipulation of history can change that truth. What they did not understand is that memory lives in more than books. Memory lives in rhythm, in the way a drumbeat mirrors the heartbeat of the earth. It lives in language, in the way African tongues twist and sing with life. It lives in the dance, in the way the body tells stories older than words. It lives in the gaze of a grandmother who carries centuries of knowledge behind her smile. That memory has always been our crown, invisible, yet indestructible, and now it is awakening again. We are that generation, the one the ancestors dreamed of. The generation that would no longer beg to be seen but would stand up to be remembered. The generation that carries history not as a burden but as a badge of honor. We are the living continuation of the dynasties that time tried to erase. We are the voice of Egypt reborn, the spirit of Mali revived, the wisdom of Ife renewed. We are the proof that greatness cannot be destroyed, it only transforms. The blood waited for us to awaken, and now that we are awake, nothing can stop what was always destined. There is something sacred about resilience. To endure centuries of oppression and still rise with hope is not weakness, it is proof of divine design. They broke our bodies, but they could not break our lineage. They silenced our ancestors, but the silence grew into a roar. Today that roar echoes through music, through art, through knowledge, through unity. Every time a black child learns their history, the blood rejoices. Every time a person of African descent walks with pride, the ancestors rise. Every act of self-love is rebellion. Every word of truth spoken is a resurrection. They tried to make us forget who we are because they knew that if we ever remembered, the world would shift. The return of African consciousness is not just cultural, it is global. The same fire that built pyramids now builds technology. The same wisdom that ruled empires now guides education, science, and art. The African spirit does not fade, it adapts. That is why it survives everything. Slavery, colonization, racism, exploitation, and still stands tall. The blood carries the memory of every trial and every triumph, and it whispers the same truth through every age. You were never meant to bow, you were meant to build. Even in the lands of exile, the descendants of Africa have carried their royal essence. Look around the world in every field, from music to science, from leadership to invention, you will find the reflection of that unbreakable lineage. You can silence a name, but you cannot silence the essence behind it. You can hide the crown, but you cannot erase the posture of a king. The children of Africa walk like royalty because it is written in their blood to rule their own destiny. Now is the time to reclaim that birthright, not through dominance, but through enlightenment. True power is not control, it is awareness. The moment we understand who we truly are, the chains fall from the mind. The power of black royal blood is not about conquering others, but about conquering the illusion that we were ever left. It is about understanding that every challenge we face today is not proof of weakness, but a reminder of our responsibility to rise again. The ancestors did not survive for us to forget. They survived so we could continue the story they began. When you look into the mirror, see more than your reflection. See the kingdoms behind your eyes. See the queens who ruled with wisdom and the warriors who fought with honor. See the builders of civilization whose genius shaped the world. You are not a product of survival. You are the result of legacy. You are the echo of greatness calling itself back to life. You are the continuation of something timeless. The blood that remembered is the blood that will rebuild. And when the world once again recognizes Africa for what it truly is, the cradle of wisdom, the mother of civilization, the fountain of humanity, it will be because this generation chose to remember. They tried to erase us, but the blood remembered. And now that memory is not just awakening, it is roaring. The drums are beating again, the crowns are shining again, the people are rising again. History has come full circle, and the forgotten kings and queens are walking the earth once more, not in palaces of stone but in hearts that know the truth. The blood remembered, and because it did, the world will never be the same again. Royalty is not about crowns, it is about consciousness. A crown may glitter, but it can be taken away. Consciousness, once awakened, cannot be destroyed. True royalty is not measured by gold or status. It is measured by awareness. The understanding that your worth was written long before anyone tried to define you. The rebirth of Africa and of its people across the world begins when every man and woman of African descent stands tall and declares, I know where I come from. Because when you know where you come from, you begin to see where you are meant to go. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, dream differently. You stop asking permission to exist. You stop apologizing for your power. You stop doubting your reflection, because you finally understand that your reflection is the echo of greatness. For too long, the world has taught us that royalty must be seen, that it must wear crowns, jewels, and robes to be recognized. But true royalty needs no audience. It is not an image, it is an energy. It is not about being above others. It is about being within yourself. The royalty of Africa has always been inward, built on wisdom, balance, and purpose. The Yoruba called it Ori, the divine consciousness within every human being. The Igbo called it Chi, the spark of destiny placed inside each soul. Every ancient African civilization understood this truth. Before you could rule others, you had to rule yourself. That is the foundation of royal consciousness. The consciousness of royalty is the power to create, to lead, to rise above limitation. It is knowing that you were not born to follow the patterns of others, but to design your own. Every great African king and queen carried that awareness. They understood that their reign was a reflection of their inner order. Their crowns symbolized their discipline, not just their wealth. They ruled with empathy, not ego. They saw themselves as servants of purpose, not owners of people. And that is what modern royalty must remember. That the crown is not a symbol of privilege, but of responsibility. When African people lost sight of that consciousness, colonization found its doorway. The oppressor did not conquer with weapons alone. He conquered with deception. He made us forget that we were already royal. He taught us to see our skin as a curse instead of a crown. He made us chase symbols of wealth while abandoning the source of it. Our mind, our unity, our identity. The greatest theft was not of gold or land. It was of consciousness. Because once a person forgets who they are, they become easier to control. Once they doubt their worth, they begin to live beneath their potential. That is why awakening the royal consciousness is not a matter of pride. It is a matter of liberation. Royal consciousness is awareness that you are not defined by circumstances. It is the quiet realization that even in chains your spirit cannot be broken. It is the understanding that the same blood that built empires still flows within you, that your ancestors' victories are written into your DNA. You don't have to seek validation from systems that were designed to limit you. You were born validated. You were born chosen. You were born capable of shaping worlds. Every act of creation, every word of truth, every stand for justice is an expression of that royalty. You see, the world tries to make royalty a privilege of birth, but true royalty is a privilege of awakening. You can be born into a palace and live as a slave to ignorance, or be born into struggle and rise as a king in conscience. That is why the rebirth of Africa is not about reclaiming old thrones. It is about reclaiming old truths. It is about understanding that every child of African descent carries a hidden crown within them, waiting to be lifted through knowledge and youth. The consciousness of royalty teaches that leadership begins with character. The great African empires flourished, not only because of their armies, but because of their values, honesty, courage, and spiritual balance. A king who lacked integrity was no king at all. The Igbo believed that the true test of greatness was omenila, living in harmony with truth and justice. The Yoruba believed that no ruler could govern without iwapela, good character and humility. These values are not relics of the past, they are blueprints for our future. The rebirth of Africa will not come from politics or wealth alone. It will come from character, from men and women who understand that power without purpose is poison. Royal consciousness is also about unity. In the past, our ancestors understood that their strength came from their togetherness. A kingdom divided could not stand. The colonizers knew this too. That's why they divided. They separated tribes, languages, and beliefs to make us forget that we were one family. But consciousness heals what division destroys. When you awaken to who you are, you also awaken to who your brother and sister are. You begin to see no enemy in your reflection, no rival in your kin. You begin to rebuild the bridges that history burned. This awakening is happening now, across oceans and generations. The children of the diaspora are finding their way back to their roots, not just physically but spiritually. They are learning the languages, the stories, the traditions that once shaped civilization. They are realizing that their greatness was never stolen, only hidden. And as this awareness grows, the vibration of Africa rises once again. Every artist, thinker, and dreamer who walks with pride in their heritage is part of this resurrection. Every person who chooses truth over illusion contributes to the rebirth of an entire people. To be royal is to live with purpose. It is to understand that your existence is not accidental, that your life has meaning far beyond survival. You are here to continue what your ancestors began, to build, to teach, to heal, to create. When you carry that consciousness, you become unstoppable. You stop fighting for approval and start walking in destiny. You stop surviving and start leading. You realize that your story is not one of defeat but of transformation. Royalty then is not a distant history. It is a living state of mind. It is the awareness that even when stripped of material wealth, you still possess the one treasure no one can take, the truth of who you are. It is the understanding that no matter what the world says, your existence is proof of excellence. The rebirth of Africa begins with that awareness. It begins with you, with every thought that honors your worth, every step that reflects your dignity, every action that uplifts your people. So walk as kings and queens, not in arrogance, but in assurance. Speak as royalty, not to boast, but to remind others of their own light. Build as royalty, not for vanity, but for legacy. Because true royalty is not found in gold or glory, it is found in consciousness. And when that consciousness awakens in every black heart across the world, no power on earth will be able to erase the truth again. The crowns will rise, the people will unite, and Africa, the mother of all civilization, will once again take her place, not because of thrones, but because of consciousness that cannot be conquered. The bloodline was never broken, only forgotten. Through centuries of oppression, displacement, and distortion, what was once sacred and powerful was hidden under the dust of time. But blood does not forget where it comes from. It carries memory and silence, whispering through generations that no matter what the world tried to erase, something eternal lives within. The black bloodline was carved in the wisdom of the Nile, molded in the discipline of the Yoruba, and strengthened in the resilience of the Igbo. It thrived in the heartbeat of kingdoms that once ruled trade, philosophy, science, and spirituality before the world even knew how to measure greatness. They tried to bury these legacies beneath chains, false history, and rewritten books. But truth cannot die. It only waits for courage to resurrect it. Across time, the black man and woman carried the essence of this royalty in their walk, their speech, and their survival. Even when the world labeled them inferior, their very existence defied the lie. Every field worked, every dream rebuilt, every song sung in pain and pride was a continuation of a lineage that refused to die. It was not kings and queens who were lost. It was the recognition of what they truly were. This forgetting was not just historical, it was spiritual, cultural, and generational. Yet now the tide is shifting. A new awakening is stirring among the descendants of Africa, who are tracing their names back to their roots and finding that the blood still speaks. What was once fragmented is reconnecting. The scattered sons and daughters of Africa, those from the Caribbean, the Americas, Europe, and beyond, are looking back and realizing they were never disconnected. The same rhythm that beats in African drums beats in their heart. The same creativity that birthed pyramids lives in their innovation. The same pride that crowned their ancestors is slowly returning. It's not arrogance, it's remembrance. It's the quiet but powerful recognition that we are not the story the world told us. We are the truth that time tried to hide. The bloodline carries resilience like armor and wisdom like a torch, lighting the way for those still lost in darkness. For too long, history has been told by those who feared the truth of Africa's greatness. They reduced dynasties to myths and warriors to slaves, scholars to nameless figures, and queens to footnotes. But now a generation refuses to inherit that silence. They are digging up the buried names, restoring the lost faces, and rewriting the narrative not as victims but as visionaries. The black bloodline is reclaiming its throne not through conquest, but through knowledge, pride, and unity. It is remembering that before borders, before colonization, there was connection. Before division, there was community. And before shame, there was honor. Every movement in art, fashion, language, and identity that celebrates African roots is not just cultural, it is ancestral remembrance. When the diaspora reconnects to their heritage, they do more than honor their past, they awaken their future. The spirit of Shaka Zulu, Queen Zinga, Mansa Musa, and the Benin artists lives in the heartbeat of those who dream beyond limits today. They remind us that legacy is not built on what we own, but on what we remember. A person who knows their lineage becomes unstoppable because they walk not alone but with thousands of ancestors behind them, guiding every step, whispering every truth. And that's the beauty of this rebirth. The world is witnessing the return of a people who never truly left. Africa is not just a continent, it is a consciousness spreading through music, innovation, and spiritual awakening. From the streets of Lagos to the heart of New York, from Kingston to London, the rhythm of remembrance is pulsing louder than ever. The bloodline is finding its way home through DNA tests, cultural rediscovery, and the power of storytelling. Each connection, each truth uncovered, is a thread weaving the tapestry of unity once again. The time of forgetting is ending. The time of remembering is here. When the diaspora unites with the homeland, something divine happens. The lost pieces of a shattered mirror come together to reflect the true image of greatness. The world will soon realize that Africa's strength has never been in what it lost, but in what it preserved despite losing everything. The bloodline has endured war, colonization, and lies, yet it still rises. That is the definition of royal blood resilience, not privilege. True royalty is earned by those who survive, rebuild, and rise again. No dynasty ever truly dies when its spirit lives in the descendant. Every young black child who learns their true history is a crown being restored. Every artist who paints their ancestors' faces is building a temple of remembrance. Every voice that speaks truth to power is another empire rising from the ashes of silence. This is the moment when the world sees that the bloodline was never diluted. It only waited for the right generation to remember. The strength that once built civilization still flows through every vein. The intelligence that charted the stars still guides the visionaries of today. The courage that defied the impossible still beats in the hearts of those who dare to rise. The rebirth of this truth is not for nostalgia but for transformation. When a people remember who they are, they stop asking for permission to exist. They begin creating a future worthy of their name. The African bloodline, once forgotten, is reclaiming its place in history not with anger but with purpose. The goal is not revenge, it is restoration. The purpose is not division, it is unity. Because the royal blood that built Africa was never about dominance. It was about balance, creation, and connection. When the diaspora stands with the homeland again, the full circle of history completes itself, and the world will see the rise of something greater than an empire. It will see the rebirth of identity. So let the world watch as the forgotten remember. Let them see how the same blood they tried to erase becomes the foundation of a new future. Let the children of the sun rise again, not as broken survivors but as living proof that no force can destroy what was born divine. The bloodline was never broken, only forgotten, and now it remembers.